Okay, we're going to shift gears now and talk about coverage families. And we're going to talk about specifically, we group coverages into families. And this is really important. I know some of what we've been talking about doesn't have tremendous application for the fools, but this does, even though it still looks like we're talking about pass coverage. This still has tremendous relevance for the linemen and everybody else because it gives you a general understanding of what a defense is trying to accomplish based on how they line up pre-snap. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a numbers game. Some of this you have an idea of if you've watched football on TV with commentators that explain really well. A lot of people use these terms and don't necessarily use them in the most educated light. So anyway, hopefully this is clarifying. If it's not new, if it's new, then that's great too. So we group them in families based on how many DBs they have above the hard deck. So we've already talked about being above the hard deck at level 3 and how when you're above the hard deck, you can't really support the run very quickly. You can't play man coverage, not really, and you can't blitz. So we know that somebody above the hard deck is in some kind of deep responsibility for sure. Now, the number of people they commit above the hard deck tells you then the number of safeties in particular. So forget about the corners for a minute. The number of safeties they commit above the hard deck tells you how many people they have left over to do all those other jobs. And that becomes important for the overall numbers game that any defense will play. So here we go. Let's talk about the most important one first, and that is the no deep family. So there's nobody, the family number 1 is there's nobody above the hard deck between the hashes. In other words, there's no non-cornerback above the hard deck. Okay? That's 100% of the time going to be man coverage. You will see, and I'll walk you through this, the PowerPoint's just going to kind of unfold how all this works, but they have 2 more defenders than we have blockers in the run. They can if they choose. They don't always do this, but they can if they choose bring 1 more than we can block, and the formation doesn't really matter. So you can see there are some issues for us in the no deep family. We call the safety that's closest to the boundary or on the short side of the field, we call that safety jack. The jack is going to tell you which side you're outnumbered. That's more for the quarterback. The quarterbacks and I have discussed what that means and how it impacts how they handle this situation. But the point you can see, and don't necessarily worry about all these different coverages, although you will notice later on receivers that they can bracket you out of this family. But in the no deep family, it's just important for us to understand that we have a fundamental numbers issue, and we have to recognize it, deal with it, and attack it, which we will talk about. So now if they have 1 guy above the hard deck, 1 safety above the hard deck, I should say, more specifically, we call this a 1 safety family. A lot of people, and you'll hear me use this a little bit interchangeably, a lot of people will call this post safety defense because that 1 player above the hard deck, the so-called jack, that 1 player above the hard deck is usually in position to play the post route. So if you hear people say post safety defense, they're really just talking about 1 guy between the hashes above the hard deck. That's it. Post safety or 1 safety defenses can be man or zone. They are always going to have an advantage. Again, I'll lay this out for you in a minute, but they're always going to have an advantage against the run of 1 guy. There are ways to neutralize that advantage. There's a lot of different ways to neutralize that advantage. But as a starting point, they're going to begin with a 1-man advantage. Pass rush is now even. They can't outnumber the pass rush, but if they could, if they want, they can bring as many as we have blockers. So they can bring a pass rusher for every potential blocker we have and create one-on-ones across the board without any help if they choose. And sometimes people will play a post safety or 1 safety defense because they want to get pressure without the risk of a no deep type look, and they think somebody's going to win one-on-one. They don't think they need to outnumber your protection. They think somebody's going to win. We will talk at times about cornerback depth, eyes, and leverage. We actually just did talk about it. So if it is important, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, if it is important for us to know if it's a man version or a zone version of one of these 1 safety family defenses, It's the corners that tell us the coverage numbers, and we're not getting into coverage numbers right now, but coverage numbers tend to be odd numbers in the one safety family. So if we label a coverage with an odd number, chances are it's telling you there's one safety above the hard deck and it's in this family. Defenses usually call post safety or one safety defenses as a thought to defend the run first or to pressure the pass without taking the risk of nobody in the deep middle. Whereas if you go back to why would a defensive coordinator call a no deep, why would a defensive coordinator call a no deep? It's because they really want pressure. They want to outnumber your protection. It is aggressive, and it shows very little respect for your receivers and great confidence in their DBs because they're giving them no help in the deep middle of the field. That's the difference philosophically between the one safety defense and the no deep defense. Receivers should almost take the no deep defense personally in terms of they have so much confidence in your ability not to win against their corners. They're not even putting anybody above the hard deck. A little bit like in baseball, if you came up to bat and they pulled all their outfield in, that's really receivers what they're doing when they're in a no deep play, a no deep look. Now they have two safeties above the hash, above the hard deck, in or near the hash area. That's obviously a two safety family. The nickname that a lot of people will give that is the split safety family. So if people say somebody's playing a split safety defense, that's just another way of saying they're playing a two safety defense. They're playing two non-corners above the hard deck. Again, this can be man or zone. You'll notice now that the run number's even up for us. We can put a blocker on every defender in the box. We have the ability to put a blocker on them in a two safety family defense. So our run numbers get better. Typically, this is called to strengthen pass coverage, pass defense by the defense. So we now can double team one of their pass rushers. They can only bring one less than we can protect. Notice that the safeties relationship is going to change when the ball's on the hash. We're going to do a lot of homework based on how those safeties are aligned because there's different things that can happen out of a two safety family. Without getting ahead of myself, a lot of two safety family coverages can disguise and become one safety family right after the snap if a team really likes to do that. So we do pay careful attention to how the safeties relate to each other. That's really, really important. Again, you can get tells on man or zone based on the corner depth, eyes, and leverage, sort of like we talked about earlier. And again, most of the coverage family, if you see an even number, if we say, hey, this is cover 4, or this is cover 6, or this is cover 8, the fact that it's even kind of tells you, oh, yeah, it's in the two safety family. So those are ways that you can think about that. That's the overview. Why is the defensive coordinator calling two safety? In the most general sense, it's because he's more concerned about pass than run, generally speaking.